Well, good morning or good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Ian Alexander, and I head up marketing for telemetry. And I am joined by Stephen Schwander, who heads up telemetry's client services group. Good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Thank you, and good morning to you.
And Stephen and I do these webinars pretty much monthly, and we kind of draw on our experiences as an organization, telemetry. Telemetry, for your background, is a recruitment marketing platform provider. So we provide software for companies to get more of the right people to apply for their jobs. And we do that by helping them distribute jobs to social networks, job boards, recruiting agencies, digital ads, etc. We have a candidate relationship management system, so clients can organize and centralize all of their potential candidates into one segmented talent pool and then use email tools to engage that talent pool. And we have a complete candidate experience platform where you can showcase your brand through branded career sites. You can have multiple targeted career sites to different particular job families and job types. Everything's mobile and social enabled, and as well as full flexible apply options as well. So that's kind of what telemetry does. And we talk to our hundreds of clients all year long and lots of prospective clients, and so we gather that information and try and push it out so it'll be helpful for others who are looking at improving their recruiting results. And we always have a great time doing them. We appreciate you being here. A little bit of housekeeping. You can ask questions in the GoToMeeting webinar console, and just ask those questions as they come to you. We may not get to them till the end, but if they are appropriate to the conversation, we will try and work them in. So today, we're talking about job applications in the engagement era, and we're going to talk about what that is. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the engagement era, as I said, what it is, why we're talking about the engagement era, the importance of conversion to candidate engagement, the role of applications in candidate engagement, and some key practices for success as you are, implementing your apply processes or evolving your apply processes. And Stephen's going to give us some examples, both good and bad, of ways to go about things. So we hope we have enough for everybody to keep you entertained and educated. I'm going to start off by talking about the engagement era, but let's talk about it from the standpoint of where we are kind of now, and we're kind of in an inflection point where we're evolving to a new era, which is the engagement era. So the apply era, where we are now and where we're evolving away from, is a process where you're gathering all the hiring information that you could possibly need at the point of inquiry for a particular candidate for a particular job. And apply era is going to go something like this. Candidates are attracted to your jobs, or maybe they're attracted to you as an employer through a job board, social network, an event, whatever it happens to be. They find the job that they want. They provide you with a full application, whether they're qualified or not, or if they'd like to get more information about a job or have a conversation about the job or questions, they pretty much hit a brick wall. And kind of the guiding principle of the apply era has been that, look, applications help weed out the people that aren't serious, right, or that are unfit for a particular job. We've got enough applicants to deal with. This application process does double duty. It gives us the information we need, and it's kind of a gatekeeper for people who aren't as serious about a particular position. Now, this apply era has works especially good if there's high unemployment, works especially good for non-specialized jobs. If you're not dealing with high volume jobs, you can definitely get away with this. Works better for Gen X or Boomer generation than it does for Gen Y or Gen Z. Works fine if you have really broad and effective channels to talent. So if you have communities or job boards or areas that you know you're going to get really qualified candidates and available candidates, it can work just fine. If you have a super strong employer brand, you get away with the apply era. type applications. But in general, this approach is kind of like asking for a prenup on the first date, right? It's a pretty high barrier to entry, and you're kind of putting the cart before the horse in a lot of ways. So now let's talk about the engagement area.
Yeah, I'll pick up here. I always think when I think about this, I always think a little bit about the history of this as well, because I started recruiting just before the internet. Matter of fact, was responsible for putting in the first applicant tracking system at Reuters when I was working in New York, and I remember early on. It was very simple to apply online. We didn't have the long application. You just uploaded your resume, and then you never actually filled out a complete full application form until you sat down for an interview. And so it felt a little bit more pleasant because you at least knew that you were starting a relationship. Now, because of the advent of longer application forms, the capacity to collect all that extra information, the need and necessity for the information downstream, post-hire, right? All of that has pushed these huge applications up front. So it becomes a lot more difficult. And I think that it's starting to backfire now. We're starting to see that people are expecting something different. And so if we can kind of move in our own environments from this application era into an engagement era, I think what we're going to experience is, number one, a lower barrier to entry, right? If you're running a retail store, you want people to come in and shop around and develop some interest, relatively quickly. You want them to give you enough information so that you learn a little bit about them, right? But you don't want to make that first engagement really difficult. So you want to lower that barrier to entry. Oftentimes candidates are sourced by a recruiter, sometimes referred by a colleague. So there's this, quick sense of intimacy, and then bang, they hit a tough application. So again, you want to keep that barrier low, particularly for those that are sourced by recruiters and referral colleagues, right? You want to give people an opportunity to quickly express interest, as maybe by an opt-in to a talent network or a really quick draft initial apply. Some ATSs are calling them sort of two-step process, where they say, here's my resume, I really think I'm fit for this job. If you do too, I'll give you more information, if you will, right? But something a little bit different there. Recruiters can vet the candidate and then reach out for more information later on, right? We just need enough information to know whether or not we bring them to the next step. Then you want to be able to keep a candidate in the CRM, right, so that you can reach out to them for future jobs, so that engagement goes beyond the specific job they're expressing interest to and moves into the organization.
Yeah, Stephen, and I know you've been around a while in recruiting.
Oh, thank you.
My parents and grandparents have told me about a time when you didn't even fill out an application till you were called in for an interview. Back in the paper days, before all this, I mean, it was very much for professional positions, for sure. I'm told by pioneers that this was, that the idea of an application before an interview was pretty rare.
Yeah, I think again, if we think about the engagement era, it works for now, right? When there is low unemployment, there are shortages specifically in specialized talent, right? Our recruiting teams, or at least the people that I meet with when they sit down and want to learn more about CRM, they're increasingly reliant on passive candidates, right? And I still like the idea that Monster posed many years ago called the poised candidate, right? The passive candidate's the person that ain't going to move for nothing, right? But that poised candidate is the one where you trigger a little bit of interest in her, and then she wants to respond real quickly, but she doesn't want to give you all of that information up front, right? So we're reliant on those people. It's mobile technology, right? So the engagement era works for mobile technology. I get a ping on my mobile phone. I like what I'm looking at. I want to start the conversation. Boom, boom. It's real quick, right? Obviously, Gen Y, Gen Z. Even for me, I don't have time anymore in my day to go through these huge application processes, right? It works for a decrease in the effectiveness of traditional channels, meaning traditional channels just don't work as well anymore. So the non-traditional channels tend to be more mobile, tend to be far quicker, right? And it works because this is what we expect, right? I don't expect to go onto Amazon.com and be asked for my credit card before I'm going to even shop around, right? So it meets our consumer quality.
Right, and you've got the Pokemon Go screenshot there just because when you think about it, as recruiters, we need to be thinking in terms of when we come across a Pokemon, we ought to grab it, right? Because we're always on the hunt for it. So we ought to grab them as quickly and as easily as possible instead of putting up a barrier to do that. So that's why I threw that up there.
Excellent. I like that. I've just lost my screen for a second, but let me catch up here with you. What is the engagement-based application like, right? So first of all, it gives you portable profiles, right? So I mean, think about it. You're sitting on your phone. Just think logically here for a second. How do you even get a hold of your resume or your profile to even begin the process of submitting your interest, right? So you want portable profiles. Can they reach their profile on LinkedIn through your application process on their mobile phone? Can they do it with an Indeed resume? Can they do it by capturing their resume out of Dropbox or Google Drive, et cetera, right? I think an engagement-based application process also almost requires a multi-step application process. And if you think about it, this is an ongoing conversation. Again, why should I tell you everything about me if you're not even going to be relatively interested in me? So by giving you my resume, maybe answering a question or two so that as a recruiter, you can begin to have that conversation with me, and then I'll come back later and give you more information when the next step requires that, right? Engagement-based application models almost require talent networks because maybe we're in a conversation about the wrong job right now, but the right job may be right around the corner. So as we engage in that conversation, you've got me in your talent network, and we can continue to engage in that conversation. An engagement-based application model just absolutely requires shorter forms, right? And the ability to convert at a much higher basis. So it may mean that we have to begin to think about what conversion means, right? Into talent networks or into a draft application or into a complete application. Ian's got some great ideas on conversion and will really help us to envision why this is important.
Yeah, so speaking of conversion, it's the next slide. And the point there is, as Stephen said, is however you engage, you need to be focused on conversion rate. It should be your guide for everything. And if you don't know what your application conversion rate is, you should learn it, and you should monitor it, and you should increase it. So here, what I have is a typical conversion funnel. It was taken from a telemetry client. It was about a 2-month time span where we grabbed some data. And as you can see at the bottom of the funnel, it's how many people viewed jobs or viewed the career sites, about 1 million people. You can see the 2 middle portions are the online application portion. We had about 111,000 people press that apply button and begin the application process. We had 26,000 people complete the application and become applicants, and then on up to 617 people being hired. So if you look at that, that is a 23% conversion rate from application starts to completed applicants. And then again, on top of that, a 2.4% conversion rate fully through to hires. Now, the reason conversion is so important is because if you could just increase that conversion rate by 20%, and to put it in absolute numbers, add 3.6% to that conversion rate. So instead of 24%, you go to 27.6% conversion. Just that incremental change will give you nearly 50% more applicants. It'll give you 50% almost more hires. And if you keep the same conversion rate to number of hires, it's a 33% reduction in cost per hire. That particular nexus point where the applicant fills out an application has huge ramifications for your entire results as a recruiting department. And from our experience, far too few organizations spend enough time, as much time as is necessary here, to really fine-tune their recruiting process through the apply process. And with the whole idea of this engagement-based apply process is really around increasing that conversion rate and getting more of those passive candidates. Because I know it's been said before, but the people that don't go through the apply process, that bail out, are not the best candidates. Those are your most committed candidates. You could say those are your most desperate candidates, but they're not always those passive candidates who are already employed someplace else because they don't have time and they don't have the pressing need because they're getting that paycheck every month. So let's talk about keys to success in the engagement era. So the first one is huge, make it mobile. Glassdoor has done several studies, annual studies, of what percentage of candidates are likely to browse for jobs on mobile devices, and it's around 80%. It's a huge number of potential candidates. Another reason to make it mobile, Google favors companies that have mobile career sites and apply process. Your jobs will show up higher in the search responses. So more traffic to your career site if you make it mobile. Obviously, companies with, if you get somebody to your site and your apply process is not mobile optimized, it does not reflect well on your organization's employer brand. And if you're trying to get the best in talent, this turns off candidates increasingly. It gets less acceptable year in and year out. Obviously, offering those social profile and cloud storage apply options where I can just simply give you my LinkedIn profile and your apply process parses it in, fills out the form for me, huge on mobile browsers, right? Because right now, not a lot of those 80% of mobile browsers are actually applying online because the industry is not caught up. But there are tools out there, and you have at your disposal the ability to really optimize your apply processes for mobile and take advantage of that 80%. And then, if you don't, even in the absence of that, giving mobile browsers an option to request a job link. So I don't want to apply now, I can't apply now, but I do want to apply later. Give me a button that says apply later and email me that particular job link and let me do it when I'm at a desktop or at a place where I am comfortable in filling out the full application. And then here's your pro tip. Everything you do to mobile optimize your applications is going to help your desktop applications. So if you do nothing else but focus on mobile, you're increasing the conversion rates and the quality of candidate experience during the apply process across every point of engagement in the application process. Another key to success, break it up. As Stephen alluded to, multi-step applications, right? You want to be able to capture that candidate's information when they're interested, right? Because they may be the perfect candidate for the job you have. And even if they're not, they're likely a candidate for jobs that are coming up, right? And you want to gather that information for candidates. So have a step one that gathers information quickly. And again, social profiles, resume uploads from desktop or from cloud options are great ways to quickly capture that candidate's information. You've got everything you need to source at that point. You've got their experience, you've got their qualifications, their education. You really have captured that candidate's profile for future use and for the job that you have. Now, you could do multi-steps in a number of different ways. You could have an initial resume upload, and then you could do a short application that gives you just core information. If there's some core information that you need as an organization, you could get that in a second step. Or you could have just simply a two-step process, which is upload the resume and then email out a link to a full application when and if that candidate is actually going to be considered for that position. But either way, you've gathered that candidate information. Again, starting that engagement for the engagement era with the initial step one, then get the rest of the information down the road.
Yeah, I love the idea of keeping it short. I thought 15 minutes was a little bit long when I saw this slide, but goodness gracious, we will meet with some clients sometimes and find out that application processes can be up to 45 minutes long. So I actually went through one the other day and timed out because I made the mistake of playing with it while I was actually on a train, right? And it's just crazy. And I think this is the world we live in today. We want to be thorough, but we want to be quick. So you want to keep that process. I still would argue the slide prior, that initial show of interest should probably be under 5 or 7 minutes. So you want to keep it short. You want to remove the questions and the data gathering that really are only relevant to the final hire process, or that in some areas where we have clients that are heavy on compliance. There are questions that have to be answered before they can actually make the offer, but those are not the questions you want to be asking before you even know if you want to make the offer. So again, by breaking up that application process, you can ask questions when and where they make sense, right? We'll talk about this when we go through some examples, but how about getting rid of registration, right? Just think about shopping, and if you jump on a shopping site, they always give you the opportunity to register if you want, but they also let you continue as a guest, right? So you're not being forced to create this whole huge registration process up front. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get through some of the examples. Don't be afraid of screening. And a lot of our clients are having problems because maybe they do high volume recruitment and they need to have somebody who's absolutely has a bachelor's degree or at least a high school degree. They don't want to have to deal with a whole lot of applicants who don't have that. So don't be afraid of asking questions that are obviously screening out based on those minimum requirements. I think that applicants appreciate that as well if they kind of understand what's going on. And here's just a little tidbit by Appcast, is that sub 50-minute applications actually increase your completion rates by 365%. So just doing that work alone, will triple your completion rates. Here's one for them. How about doing some of the work for them? I went through an application process last week where the first thing they asked me for, well, after registering, of course, the first thing they asked me for was my resume. I said, great, here's my resume. The next thing they asked me for was my address, and then my work experience, and my education. I said, but wait a minute, I just gave you my resume. So if your application process is not parsing, and I find it hard to believe in this day and age that there are application processes out there that are not parsing data from resumes or CVs or social profiles, then absolutely, that's the #1 thing you should be doing right now, right? So fill it out for them, and here's a thought too. Maybe consider eliminating some of the validation of the data. So depending upon what your application process is like, even if you parse data into an ATS form, sometimes that form itself is a little clunky. And so when you require somebody to validate something that ultimately doesn't matter from a selection perspective, sometimes the piece of data you're asking them to parse is in that ATS 3 and 4 pages deep. Right? So it just becomes that much more complex. Most parsing engines, run at a good 96 to 97.5% accuracy, and I would argue in the data that really matters, it's closer to 100% accurate. So don't force people to validate data that doesn't matter downstream.
Right, and then just to talk a little bit about registration, Stephen, we have a client that had at the registration point had 90% drop off at registration. And that's an important point to note because I talk to people all the time and ask them what their drop off rate is, and typically a lot of applicant tracking systems will let you know what the drop off rate is post registration. So really question the metrics that you're looking at. If you do have an ATS, and they're not doing it to be devious, it's just a matter of when the definition of the start point is for their particular drop-off metrics. But make sure is this pre or post registration, because 90% is a pretty significant number, and that's not out of the realm of norm. So we talked about talent networks. This is really huge because you may not have jobs open for people, and they also are a great way for passive candidates to just indicate their interest and give you some information. So having a talent network option is huge. But there's a lot of different kinds of things that are called talent networks out there. Sometimes it's job alert opt-in. Sometimes it's name an email and give me check a box as to what kind of jobs you're interested in. Um, but there's some do's and don'ts. So the first one is, if you possibly can, segment your talent networks by job family. It's better to have a broad talent network than no talent network, but it's significantly better to be able to segment. So if you have research scientists and you have seasonal laborers, you may not want to throw them into the same talent network. By putting them in separate talent networks, you're able to source more effectively. You're able to locate candidates that have like backgrounds much more easily, and you're able to offer an experience to that group that is really tailored to them. So if you have super specialized job families, you're able to really offer a really tailored experience as they opt into that particular talent network. You impress them, you give them a great candidate experience. Do make it prominent on all career site pages. Some organizations are like, well, we really want the application, and if they're not going to apply, well, then we'll get them in our talent network. So it's kind of a second option, but you really need to make it front and center right alongside that apply button, because you want to gather as much candidate data and as many candidates as possible, especially to the extent that you can house them in that talent network, or you can house them in an overall talent pool. That becomes valuable both for the current job and down the road. Do use social profile and resume extraction for talent networks. This is a big no-brainer. It makes it easier to sign up for the talent network, and it gives you all the sourcing data you could possibly want with just a very quick and casual expression of interest, right? It's no more work for the candidate. It's no more work for you, but you get a tremendous payoff by integrating that into your talent network. Make it quick, make it one step, short as possible, and don't make it part of your apply process. See this all the time. When you press apply and you're on a talent network opt-in, if you're sharp enough to see as a candidate that that's where you are, and you go through, tell us who you are, tell us what you've done, what kind of jobs are you interested in. Great. Now apply for the job. Tell us who you are. Give us more information. It's a double entry kind of situation. It's a double application process. It kills your response rates, and it's also very confusing and frustrating for candidates as well. Another key, spread it around, right? You have these jobs, these application processes that you've optimized and made them very quick and easy for people to express interest and apply, or talent networks. Now put them everywhere. Put them everywhere on your career site, front and center, on the first page. Don't bury them down in the job pages. Put them everywhere. And even areas like emails, put them in your signature line. Join our talent network. Put them in documents. If you have PDF files of the job descriptions, put a talent network opt-in in there in case somebody is looking at that, a link to that, or a link to the apply within PDFs. That's a great way if you're kind of doing a hybrid online, offline kind of approach. And then great tip, LinkedIn InMails, right? You spend a lot of money to have access to the LinkedIn database of talent. So when you send an email to talk to somebody about a particular position, give them a real clear way to opt into your talent network, because guess what? Now you don't have to go back to LinkedIn for that particular candidate. You've got that candidate's data now. You've got all their profile information. You become less reliant on LinkedIn. And then again, it just kind of goes along with the previous point, but make sure the talent network is an alternative to the apply. It's not meshed in, right? You have two clear choices. I can opt in, express interest, or do a full application. And especially making them separate like that helps you measure the value of each various approach. If you're getting lots of hires from your talent network, then it's centralized there, and it's segmented, and you can tell that's coming from my talent network, and you can compare that to your job applications and get a sense of which is more effective. And the next one is communication. Always acknowledge application receipt. Make sure that emails are being sent and received by your candidates when they apply for a job, acknowledging that you've received that. And I know that kind of sounds like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how often maybe that was set up in the initial implementation of your applicant tracking system, and now it's not working and nobody knows that it's happening, right? So oftentimes it's just a matter of not making sure that those types of systems are still running and they're getting delivered, et cetera. Take that opportunity to educate candidates about your hiring process and what the next steps are going to be, right? So if you have the ability to set up different types of emails for different job families, that's a great way to kind of say, here's what you can expect now that you've submitted the application. And you can also use it as a means to start a conversation or continue a conversation. So easy ways, if you have a candidate portal, you begin that interaction, introduce them to your candidate portal, say, look, you can edit your application, add information, upload documents, simply go to your candidate portal. If you've got stages and statuses of jobs in your candidate portals, get them pointed back there and start a conversation. If you've got an email box, a general recruiting email box too, maybe might give them an alternate way to reach out, reply, and try and start a conversation, etc. All good stuff for getting that engagement going right after the apply process. The next one is keep the apply button at the top of the page. Keep it at the top of emails. This is one where it just seems logical. You read through the job description, you get to the bottom, and there's an apply button. That makes a lot of sense. But don't always assume that people are reading down your page, right? And I included on here what's called a scroll map. Which is an analysis of web pages, and I put up the telemetry homepage. And the very top, you can see that 100% of the people view that top area, but as you go down not very far on this page, you can see that less than 25% of the people actually scroll down below that initial area. So I always tell people, always get that apply button up at the top of the email, up at the top of any job that you have, because it's going to increase your apply rate. Don't always assume people could be coming to your job description after having read it on Indeed or read it on a job board or read it on LinkedIn. They click through and they're at the top of the thing they just read. It's much easier that they don't have to kind of scroll down and look around for your apply button. They can just hit the apply button right away. And then finally, measure. As I said, everybody should know what their apply rate is, the ratio of people who began the application to people who completed the application. So monitor that drop-off, but also monitor the drop-off at every step, right? So if you have a when I talk about multi-step application here, I'm talking about sort of multi-pages. There are certain pages that are going to have more drop-off than others. So this is, if you can possibly institute these kinds of analytics, it's a great way to really identify trouble areas. So if you look at the United States here, if you can see, I don't know if it might be a little too small to see, but the middle column there, you have 79,000 people who started the application process. But in that first step, the welcome step, that drops down to 73,000 people. So you have a big drop off. Oh, excuse me, the second step, the apply step, drops down to 60,000 people. So you've lost 19,000 candidates just in the second step of this multi-step online process. So that's an area that says, look, this is the biggest drop off. What can you do in this particular step to optimize that and try and get those numbers up? Because again, that conversion rate, as we saw before, is super important in terms of leveraging everything else that you're doing in terms of recruiting. Now with that, Stephen's put together some examples, and Stephen, you're going to kind of go through some good and bad examples of online applications here.
Sure, exactly. So, I'm starting with a relatively typical ATS version of a job. So I think, first of all, visually, this isn't all that interesting or exciting. So I think that first option is to take a look at how are people actually viewing your jobs. Are they viewing your jobs? Do they go to a really nice career site, and then when they click on the actual job, they land on an ATS page that's not branded and doesn't have a whole lot of interest to it. And then again, where's the apply button, and what happens when they click apply now? So we go ahead and pretend that we clicked apply now. And next slide will show us what happens when we click apply now. Typically this is what happens when you click apply now, and I don't care what the ATS is. Typically you're being asked to either register or being asked to log in. Now I happen to choose a company that I worked for a while back, so I knew that I would have data in that system. So I tried to figure out, next screen, if I could remember what my password is. How many of you have had this experience, right? This certainly wasn't fun. And so I had to sit there and imagine doing this on a mobile device. What was my password again? I don't remember. Let me try to get an email, but then that email's not synced to my mobile device, et cetera. So it just becomes a difficult process.
Yeah, and I don't know if this might be coming up on the next slide, but there's always the one where you're registering and you're setting a password, and you go ahead and you set your favorite password, and then you hit next, and then you get the million rules that you need for the password, which would have been nice to know before you set your password. That's a pretty common one for pretty popular applicant tracking systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even include that one, but you're right. So so you can see the next slide then is, here's that question, do you want to use an existing resume, do you want to apply without one, you want to upload a resume, all these different options that, again, are a little bit confusing. Copy paste, what's going to happen to it then? There's not a real sense that this is going to be an easy process. More often than not, by now I've given up, right? So let's go ahead to the next slide. And again, if I do, upload my resume, then again, here's another example of quite frequently you end up in this really, complex and kludgy kind of a form that's sitting inside of an ATS. And while a lot of ATSs are doing a whole lot better job making their forms responsive, I don't equate responsiveness of design, which means can it be used on, can you view it on any size device? That's responsiveness. I don't equate responsiveness with optimization, right? Because just because I can fit this to a screen, it's still a very difficult form to have to work through. And so I think you get that idea. And again, here's just another example, different, more modern ATS, but still same kind of idea. Here's your username, password, and are you gonna, do you even remember what it is? So those are some examples, and you guys can look at your own application process and say, how are people viewing the job? When they click apply, do they hit an ATS page, or are they still on a nice branded page? When they click apply, do they have to register? What's that process like? And once they register in, what are the forms like inside? And those are the kinds of things that that you're going to want to be able to see. So I want to show you just a couple of really brief, and Ian, just to confirm that that it was switched over to my screen.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, excellent, good. So what I want to be able to show you, if I can, there we go, if I can get rid of that, is just a good example. Now, this is a fake company that we set up in our demo environment, and when you're looking at applicant experience solutions, whether you're using your own ATS system, or if you've gone out to a third-party system, hopefully these are some things that you would be able to do with that. So this is just an example. We had talked earlier about talent networks and putting buttons like this sort of everywhere that people would be able to apply real quickly. My challenge here is I can't get rid of the go-to screen. I don't know. Okay, I have a go-to screen right in the middle, and I don't know how to get rid of it. Okay, so yeah, you want to be able to give them a mobile experience that, again, they can upload a resume from a desktop if they're sitting at the desktop, but if they're not, they can jump out to LinkedIn, Facebook, Indeed, Google, wherever they have their data sitting, to do a really quick apply process. and capture that information, right? So they want to link out to that process and capture it real quickly. They want to go to Dropbox and upload their resume. In this case, it came in from LinkedIn, and I can just I can see that the data has been captured. I can come in and ask a couple of questions. If I can only get rid of this.
Stephen, there's right above the mute button. There's a little arrow that'll push it back into the side.
Ah, there we go. Okay, I was afraid to push one. I was going to drop me off the call altogether. So I was sorry about that, guys. So I just went out to LinkedIn, and again, because this is the talent network, I didn't ask it to validate that my work history was there, my education history was there. I trust the parsing process. But because it's a talent network, I did want to ask, what kind of job might you be interested in, right? And if I have, maybe a level of education, just as an example, it's real quick and easy to ask that, and then just click submit. So you can have a talent network process that is a single click, as I did, just click that first page and pull in the LinkedIn profile, or you give them a couple of questions so that you can then next time engage in a way with the candidates that actually makes sense. So why would I send somebody in HR a finance job, for instance, right? So a really quick way, an easy way to get people to join your talent network. But if we're talking about more of a full application process, again, you want to be able to make sure that they can find jobs easily. So real quick and easy search capability. Once the jobs are there, you want them to be able to apply real quickly. So let's take a look at what happens when you click a job, right? So here we looked at the examples earlier. Even companies that have really nice front ends to their career sites, once they click here, they're often hitting the ATS page I showed you earlier. In this case, you want them to hit a really nicely branded, consistent with your front end career site page. Give them the information that they need right up front. Give them the opportunity to join your talent network if this is not a role that's important to them. I've broken one of our rules here, and I don't have our apply button up top here, but you want to give them the opportunity to apply for the job real simply, and again, using a mobilely responsive form like we're looking at here, where they can, again, upload a resume from your desktop if they're sitting on a desktop, or they can come into to LinkedIn, Indeed, etc. So you want them to be able to do that real quickly. But before I do that, you also want to give them the opportunity to finish later. So this is what Ian had said earlier. So I'm on a mobile phone. I'm really interested in this, but I don't even want to start it now because I'm just about to come up to my train stop. So I do want to get the email. And so at this point in time, they're at least going to get the email back that that they want to finish later. But let's say they want to start now. You click in at LinkedIn or you upload a resume. You're going to parse it really nicely for them. Now this time, because we're applying for a job, there is information that you want to have available for your initial selection and assessment process. So this is a LinkedIn account. My LinkedIn account doesn't have a mailing address here, but it's really easy for me to add that if it was required for this application process. And again, I've got options down here. I can push forward with the application now, or I could finish it later. And now if I click finish later, I'm going to come back in and be able to start at the exact same spot that I've abandoned the process. That's also important. Why should I start over again and give you data yet all over again, right? So you want to be able to have the process be very fluid, be mobile. This is all formatted to work on a mobile device. You can see here's my work history going all the way back to my first corporate HR career job at Cablevision in New York, including Reuters, and now at my current position. Very easy to see, very easy to update. If I needed to update or add education in here, you can see how simple it is because I'm not dropping people into a complex ATS form. I'm just making it really simple and easy for them as they push it forward. Now, again, depending upon how much information you need for that first initial draft application, you could stop it right there. And now write that data into your ATS, and your recruiters can start the initial selection and assessment process. If they like what they see, they can send an invite back out to complete the application. Or maybe your compliance requires you to ask a couple of additional questions, or you have a screen out that says, really, I need somebody with a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. Just add another couple of questions. If it's very easy to click, candidates are not going to be too concerned about that. I think this day and age we're all familiar with these questions, and so sometimes we're required to ask these at the very, very front of the process. Sometimes we can ask them later, but that's how a really nice, fluid, very simple, mobile-enabled, modern, right, clean application process can look like online. The trick to all of this is how well your application form, right? So whatever your third-party data that you're using to put together what I just showed you, how deeply and how well is that integrated into your applicant tracking system so that you can keep people in terms of their experience outside of the applicant tracking system, but you can drop data into the applicant tracking system in real time and continue the engagement between those two pieces of technology. So we just wanted to walk you through that as an example of a couple of apply processes that put some of the things into play that we spoke about.
All right, and I timed that. It took well less than 5 minutes, so it can easily be done, and you saw it was in a very small screen with a mobile phone there. So thanks for that. We're at the end of our presentation here, so for once, we're done early. We had a couple of questions around the data that we showed earlier about the application funnel, and I just want to clarify. The question was that for a single client or was it aggregate across multiple clients? And the data is for a single client with a single application process, so it's all sort of apples to apples there in terms of looking at all the different apply processes. It's just a single apply process being used there. And I think that was all the questions we had. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. As part of signing up for this webinar, we're going to send you out a strategy snapshot around candidate experience, just a report on candidate experience with a lot of key practices for candidate experience from branding all the way, employer branding all the way through offer letter. You'll get that. You'll also get a copy of the slides and a link to a recording. You can learn more about telemetry apply solutions and our recruitment marketing platform at telemetry.com, or if you have any questions, reach out to me individually at ialexander@telemetry.com. So everybody have a great rest of the day, and thank you.
Thanks, Ian.